Hey, so this is just going to be a relatively quick video and it's about a contentious subject, which is MPs' salaries. MP, if you're not from the United Kingdom, means Member of Parliament. So basically we're talking politicians. In other countries, I guess that would be the equivalent of senators, congressmen. Um, so this is a contentious issue because the United Kingdom is still going through a period of austerity, and that's scheduled to last for some time under this Tory government. Um, I'm going to make a disclaimer here. The things I'm going to say will likely be unpopular, and I think I'm probably in the minority with these viewpoints. But I think in any debate there needs to be a balanced sort of dialogue. There needs to be, all sides need to be heard. And sometimes I think that there's sort of this collective attitude amongst the British public. I shouldn't say collective because it isn't everyone, but a sort of attitude to a certain issue that, and sometimes I think people don't I don't want to come across as arrogant here, but I think sometimes people don't think everything through and they kind of latch on to what segments of the media are feeding them. And I think this might be one such example. So I think it is important that people are objective and open-minded. And I'm not saying incidentally that, oh, I'm a fountain of knowledge and I'm right and everyone else is wrong, nothing like that. But I'm just saying that there needs to be some more objectivity in this. So anyway, MPs salaries are going to be raised, I should say, to £74,000 a year. Now, firstly, from the outset, I want to say I disagree with that raise. I disagree with it on the grounds that we are in a period of austerity. So I believe it is the wrong time for an 11% pay rise. I believe the previous wage was £67,000 a year. That is the basic wage for an MP, so it's now going to be 74,000. So it's a significant increase. Obviously, there's higher ranking politicians who get a higher salary. I believe ministers at cabinet level get 130,000, and the prime minister is, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 170,000. But given the weight of responsibility that he has, I have absolutely no issue with that salary. Um, and this is the thing, when we're talking about jobs and salaries, the key question is the amount that the person gets, does it match up to the job that they're doing? Now, on the surface, people will say that there are people who deserve the money a lot more than MPs. In the UK, I believe that we do, generally the politicians get a bad press, and no matter what they do, they're going to be attacked. And this is the problem I have with a lot of the rhetoric that is out there. It's kind of like all these sleazy politicians, these lousy politicians, etc., etc. So it's kind of this almost demonization of them, and I do believe that the press fuels this a lot of the time. And I think partly it's this kind of vigilantism because partly over phone hacking, although on this occasion it was the BBC reporting this. So I'm opposed to the pay rise, but not necessarily because I think they don't deserve it, more that it's the wrong time. Also, it's not fair that they would get an 11% pay rise when public sector workers are only getting a 1% pay rise, and I've heard in some cases there's a public sector freeze. I'm not 100% sure about that situation. Um, I mean, with my own job, I only work part-time. I don't see anything like the sort of, I get less than public sector workers because I'm not working full-time. So I'm not 100% sure what that situation is. Obviously, that's unfair. I I have enormous respect for nurses. I have enormous respect for anyone who is providing an essential job. Um, so I do agree that they need a much better salary. I believe at the moment, at starting point, nurses get something like, it's somewhere between 18 and 25,000, but I'm really not sure what the exact figure is. But I believe it should be a lot more, given that their job involves life saving. So yes, I do think they should get more. So the question here is not so much about the amount that MPs are getting, but rather the need for public sector workers to get more. But when people are kind of attacking MPs, what I would say is, well, think of the jobs where people get a lot more than MPs. Think of most media executives. Think of footballers. Think of many of those involved in the financial industry. Now, here's my question. Does someone who kicks around a ball, no matter how good they are at it, are they more deserving of that, of a vast amount of money than an MP who works very long hours? Some MPs work 12, 13 hours. And yes, I'm aware public sector workers do as well, but I'm just making this point. Um, who work long hours for their constituents. They have to deal with all sorts of issues, and they're constantly under public scrutiny. Are you telling me that a footballer deserves more than an MP? I don't think so. Are you telling me that a tabloid editor, and okay, I understand tabloid editors also probably work long hours, but think of the work they do. It's, in my opinion, it's despicable. I mean, they're promoting distortion and cynicism on a daily basis with the sleaziest sort of journalism. I don't believe they deserve their money. Um, and I'm aware of the business side of it, like the profit the newspaper makes, all this sort of thing. Um, think of bank bonuses. I mean, okay, there was a lot of public anger over that, but the average top level banker gets a hell of a lot more than even the prime minister. Whereas the prime minister, and take away what people need to take away party politics from this, okay? Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whoever the prime minister is, he or she, in my opinion, fully deserves that amount of money. Think about it. You're essentially the leading politician in a nation of 65 million people. Of course, you deserve that salary. I mean, people really need to, people who say, oh, like top level politicians don't deserve it, really, I think they're being rather ignorant about the sort of responsibility they have. And I know people are going to say, well, police have responsibility, nurses have responsibility. I fully appreciate those arguments, which is why I'm saying they deserve more. But to say that politicians don't deserve it, I think is a bit unfair. For one thing, it's collective demonization. Because there are some lousy politicians, doesn't mean that everyone is. I mean, the interesting thing here is when people are asked about politicians in general, their views are quite negative. When they're asked about their own local MP, actually the opinions tend to be more positive, which is why these people get re-elected. Now, I'm not being gullible. I know there are lousy MPs out there who, don't go to parliamentary sessions, who don't address their constituents' concerns, and they probably don't deserve to be in the position that they're in. Um, and then we have a democracy. Every 5 years, people can kick them out. So they do have to be accountable in that regard. I understand the controversy around this because we are in an era of austerity. So if I was a public sector worker and I saw this, I would feel aggrieved. So I completely understand. I just think that people need to look at the whole picture and they need to look at the work that MPs actually do. It's not as easy as people think. I think that's very unfair to think that is an easy job. I mean, you have to address not just one issue, but a wide range of issues. That's what makes it different from other jobs. You're addressing everything. You have to address anything that your constituent sends to you. I mean, that is not an easy job to do. Um, and then you have to balance your time between your constituency and Westminster. You have to deal with all sorts of committees. There's a very wide range of things that MPs have to do. And people are going to say I'm an idiot for defending them, but I think someone has to make an objective viewpoint here. Because the problem is, I think the public are influenced by a press which is hell bent on stirring up cynicism against politicians. And I do think the press collectively is partly to blame for the cynicism that is out there. I mean, we can't talk about expenses because a lot of the MPs involved in that were kicked out of office. A lot of the MPs we have now are new MPs, so it's unfair to tarnish them with the same brush. Um, I mean, of course, MPs need to prove that they're working hard for that money. Of course, it's fair that there's debate about this. But I just think that people are being short sighted, and I feel a little bit frustrated by it because how are we going to inspire future parliamentarians if the current generation constantly gets badmouthed and constantly run down by very aggressive media? This is not about an open media, this is about journalists, frankly, trying to get their own back on MPs. I honestly believe that's what it's about. I mean, take the BBC reporting this. Well, how much do you think BBC executives get? And they don't have to face the public. They're not constantly scrutinised on question time, not in the same way. Um, I don't want people to think of being gullible. I'm aware there's lousy MPs, and I'm opposed to the pay increase at this time, especially at 11%. It should be less. So what there needs to be is more of an equilibrium between what public sector workers are getting and what MPs are getting. Um, but public sector workers, they do great work, but they're not. We have to be honest here. I'm talking about individuals. Public sector workers are not personally scrutinised on the same level. Now, in case anyone thinks I'm being disrespectful, I'm really not. I have enormous respect for nurses and police officers and other people who do difficult jobs on a daily basis. But the fact of the matter is, they're not scrutinised on a daily basis in the same way that MPs are. If you're an MP, you say anything that is seen as, you know, politically incorrect, you're constantly under a microscope, constantly. And this is something that people aren't really recognising. Um, so I'm not saying that public sector workers don't deserve an increase. I want to see an increase. But I think people, when they're attacking MPs, there's another issue with this. There's an assumption that all MPs are calling for a pay increase. I suspect there's many MPs that don't want a pay increase, partly because they're decent people and they recognise that it's not fair at a time of austerity. So to kind of collectively demonise MPs is unfair. Yes, there's other MPs that have voted for it, and well, they're going to have to answer to their constituents. Let me know your thoughts on this, but please take into account everything I've said. Cheers.